Yeah, the bye was came at a great time. I think that's been well documented already. Um, Frames preparation for a challenging opponent, but also for the 6 straight weeks of conference play. So players have had a chance to renew and to recover. I could focus on academics as well as have some free time with a couple additional practices for our next opponent. So yeah, came at a great time. Coaches have been recruiting as well as staff was split. Some were out on the road recruiting, some were game planning for Air Force. So back to work today. Glad to take questions.
I believe Craig Bull was the one who at one point called it the triple option on steroids, and of course you've seen it from when really Troy Calhoun started at Air Force and all that. When you see how Air Force has kind of developed the multiple option over the years and all that, what kind of stands out to you?
Lots of history together. When I was coaching at BYU, Troy Calhoun was at Air Force, so it's been a long time and lots of different games. As the rules have evolved in college football, so have the academies in terms of their style of play. Air Force, I think, typically has been most creative in terms of their initial and kind of pre-snap presentation, as well as probably the variety of things they do after the snap. Um, so I've always really respected and thought a lot about the creativity and the innovation, but also the understanding of how to run the football. And so I think Coach Bull's description is pretty accurate, and it's never quite the same. It's not quite the same week to week, nor is it ever the same year to year. So besides adapting schematically, I think they adapted their personnel well.
And then in terms of when a team does play an option team like this or any variety and stuff like that, you always hear coaches kind of say, well, we just have to be incredibly assignment sound. We have to be physical. What are the things you are kind of preaching the team this week?
No surprise. It's consistent. So there are times where once your team adjusts to the speed and the scheme, and you hope that happens as quickly as possible during the game, then a lot of teams will find periods of consistency where they settle in and are able to execute for a while. Then there's another phase which usually happens toward the end, middle of the third quarter, and the finish of the game, where really there's decisions that have to be made by every player of if they're willing to continue to play the B gap, regardless of how many bodies are in there and whether blocks are high or low, whether they'll stay in the C gap, whether they'll take the quarterback, whether their eye control will remain disciplined, or will the wheel route get behind them. And so the concentration plus consistency and plus determination, I think, has to play out and exist the entire game if you want to defend and play them well.
Coach, can you speak to, you said it was awesome, it came at the perfect time, the bye, but can you speak to more of the health? And I know you said there's a few guys that you're hoping to come back. Is there any update there?
Yeah, I won't address the injuries, but it's likely that we'll have players back that we haven't had or didn't have last week. And yeah, that'll be really helpful. So again, we're not only looking at the health for this game, but also the health for the 6-week stretch coming up, which will be necessary, again, when you're battling in the conference week in and week out. And so I anticipate being more healthy, but I don't have updates.
Gotcha. Can you maybe speak to that on the defensive side a little bit? I know that's been light there, and obviously defending the triple option. Are you feeling confident on that side with guys coming back? Depth?
Yeah, hopeful. Every player back will help, and certainly in a week like this, it's a physical week. It's a challenging week. And so the models of preparation, you're always seeking the right balance of, can you simulate what it will look like? That answer is no. How close can you get? That answer is not very. But you certainly can work on assignments. You certainly can work on concentration. You certainly can work on the discipline parts. And then the game, especially early, kind of takes care of the rest. Hopefully you've just prepared them for and as best as possible for what's coming.
Coach, you mentioned the coaches were out recruiting, and I was curious as to the reception from potential recruits, and have you noticed any difference maybe than from 6 or 7 months ago?
Yeah, there's a lot of optimism and a lot of intrigue. even though our record hasn't been strong, folks have watched the way that we competed and played, and they see momentum, they see progress, they see excitement, and they see a direction that's encouraging. There's confidence, high confidence in myself as the head coach and our staff, that it's not if, it's just when. And so I would say that quick little couple of sentences is what I heard most back from the coaches that were out. And that's been pretty consistent from prior to us playing. Progress, bright spots, energy, competitive spirit. There's just lots that folks are seeing that's positive, and I say that's probably the overwhelming message to this point.
Not really a game week related question, but spent some time talking to Famika last week. And I talked a little bit about his playing career at BYU. He said you would be the perfect person to ask about that, of course. What do you remember about Famika as a player at BYU?
So Famika, very physical. One particular game I remember against the University of Hawaii, which had particular interest to him and sentiment because of the Polynesian connection. I believe there were 3 separate players, Hawaii players, that were put out of the game with concussions by him specifically in one game. His dad and I have been friends and colleagues for a long time. When I became the head coach at BYU, Robert and I was my offensive coordinator, and for years, as well as at the University of Virginia. Again, Famika was physical and tough, and also being developed as a young person. And so his choices have over time reflected maturity, a beautiful family now, an amazing wife, and but he was also a work in progress when he arrived at BYU in terms of maturity. And yeah, it's been fun to just see who he's become over time.
Just speak to playing at home and the hunger your team has, obviously coming off a victory and looking for that first home victory. Is that something that they're, obviously getting wins is huge, but I mean, obviously getting wins at home is big too.
Yeah, there is not a chance to have a successful and consistent football program without claiming home field advantage. It's been one of the first targeted things at each place that I've coached. Year 2 has usually been way more successful than year 1 in terms of claiming that advantage. Both places, and you'll have to fact check this, but both places were very successful in terms, I'm talking BYU and Virginia, of the home field advantage being significant. And man, does that help in terms of bowl eligibility, postseason play, but also conference play. And so we're not yet to the point where it's clearly an advantage to us to be at home. We're working on that. This week is as good of any to add to the emphasis, which will be part of the team meeting in the week's lead up. But it takes time, it takes emphasis, and it takes the right processes. And so we're in that process right now. We haven't arrived yet, but it certainly is important, and the sooner the better.
So I assume you got reacquainted to the balloon fiesta here, and that's part of the activities over the weekend is tie-in. A lot of people in town, a lot of people out and about.
Yes, you really don't have to find the balloon fiesta. It finds you, is what I've seen, and so there's lots of attention. It's a beautiful event. More importantly, one of my sons was home for the weekend from college, and so my wife was out of her mind happy, and so the balloon fiesta just seemed like that was the backdrop against more family time, which was great.
Yeah, Coach, I know you're focused on the next opponent, but do you have any comments on the Mountain West in general, watching some of the games this week? San Jose State doing well, San Diego State so-so. Any comments in general? I mean, obviously, Boise State's Boise State.
I didn't watch any Mountain West games this week, but I would say probably the sentiment, if someone were to ask me, which I'm asked fairly frequently, is it just seems like there's parity, and which is great. So if I look at the next 6 weeks and then say, where are those teams? How are they doing? I'm talking about our schedule specifically. I think that those that parity exists, and I think every team probably feels the same, that every one of those games is a winnable game. And I don't think it matters what side of the schedule they're on.
2 oars in the depth chart for Air Force between 3 different quarterbacks. In terms of preparing for that, with the offense as a backdrop as well too. I mean, what are you kind of looking to do there?
Yeah, you never know. But we did see an additional quarterback played against Navy, and so there is now film, and so that gives you an idea of if there are differences, what are they? Any of them worth schematically addressing or being aware in terms of play call, or basically is it just the same system being operated by someone different, and it doesn't have much impact in terms of maybe the physical ability. And so, yeah, it helped to have a new quarterback on film based on which one we see. At this point, I can't say there'd be a significant difference in what we do or how we prepare other than awareness.